The forgotten blackout that changed time forever. They say time is constant, that every second ticks forward, unchanging, relentless. But what if that wasn't always true? What if there was a day when time faltered? Not in theory, not in science fiction, but in our real, documented history. A global event so strange, so unsettling, it was erased, rewritten, and quietly buried. You've probably never heard of it. Most haven't. But whispers remain, in faded newspapers, cracked journals, and scattered testimonies across the world. On that day, clocks froze, the sun vanished for hours, and those who lived through it described something eerie. Silence, stillness, and then nothing. Some called it a freak solar event. Others believed it was a glitch in the fabric of reality. But what if it was something else entirely? A blackout, not just of power or light, but of time itself? This is the story of the forgotten blackout that changed time forever. 1. The day the sun disappeared. It began like any other day. There was no warning, no countdown, no ominous signs, at least not to the average person. But across multiple continents, Europe, parts of Asia, and even Africa, the same eerie phenomenon unfolded. The sun simply vanished. It didn't set. It didn't flicker. It was just gone. Historical records from 536 AD describe the event in chilling detail. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during the whole year. Byzantine historian Procopius. At first, people believed it was an eclipse, but it didn't pass. Not in minutes, not in hours, not in days. It lasted for 18 months. Imagine waking up to a dull gray sky, day after day. No sunlight, crops failing, temperatures dropping, entire seasons thrown off balance. In China, court scribes wrote of yellow dust that blotted out the sun. In Ireland, ancient annals recorded a failure of bread from the years 536 to 539. And in the Americas, the Mayan civilization entered a period of sudden decline. But what could have caused this? A volcano? That's the theory modern science offers. Specifically, a massive eruption from Iceland or Indonesia that sent ash into the stratosphere. But even that explanation doesn't fully add up. Because while volcanic winters have happened before, none triggered the global darkness, famine, and societal collapse that followed this one. And more curiously, there are gaps in the records. Missing entries. In some places, entire months simply aren't accounted for. Monks stopped writing. Scribes left blank pages. It's as if time stalled. And humanity simply paused, bewildered, blind, and unsure what came next. 2. The lost time gaps in history. When light finally returned, something strange lingered in its place. A silence. Not the kind you hear after a storm, but a historical silence. One that spans centuries. Across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, historians and archaeologists have noticed the same thing. A gaping hole in human records following the year 536. Entire chronicles stop abruptly. Temples are abandoned mid-construction. Royal lineages are left half-written. And worse, many calendars seem to disagree on what year it actually is. In Germany, coins from the 6th century abruptly change in design with no clear transitional phase. In parts of Central America, Mayan inscriptions show a sharp decline in astronomical records, as if the skies were no longer readable. But perhaps the most unsettling evidence comes from the Byzantine Empire. Their official documentation, normally meticulous, shows a 17-year stretch with almost no records of births, deaths, weather, or trade. It's as though history was put on pause and then restarted from a different script. Modern researchers have tried to explain this anomaly with disease, famine, or war. But if those were the only causes, why did time itself seem to lose continuity? In 1991, 2 German historians proposed a radical idea called the phantom time hypothesis. They argued that a large portion of the early Middle Ages, specifically 297 years, were artificially inserted into the calendar. Meaning, according to them, we might be living in the year 1728, not 2025. Their claim? That political powers like the Holy Roman Empire manipulated history to align themselves with apocalyptic prophecies and divine rulers. Sounds impossible until you realize. We don't have physical, consistent evidence for the existence of Charlemagne. We can't confirm astronomical events like eclipses or planetary alignments from that era with our current models. And we're still unsure why entire civilizations suddenly declined, not over decades, but sometimes within a single generation. The darkness of 536 may have blacked out more than just the sun. It may have fractured time itself. 3. The clocks that never synced again. When the skies cleared and the dust settled, humanity tried to resume life. But something felt off. Time, once measured by the steady rhythm of sunrises and seasons, no longer seemed consistent. Calendars that once aligned suddenly diverged. In China, royal astronomers documented solar and lunar cycles with near-perfect precision. But after 536 AD, records show discrepancies. Eclipses no longer appeared where or when expected. In Europe, the Julian calendar, introduced under Caesar, began drifting noticeably from actual solar time. By the Middle Ages, Easter was celebrated in different months depending on where you lived. The solution? In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII introduced a new calendar, the Gregorian, to fix the growing error. 10 days were instantly erased from existence. October 4th was followed by October 15th. But why had the calendar fallen out of sync in the first place? Was it simply human error? Or was something else affecting the very rotation and orbit of our planet? Modern researchers now believe that the 536 event, possibly caused by massive volcanic eruptions or even a comet impact, may have altered Earth's axial tilt. Satellites show that major geological events, like earthquakes and eruptions, can shift the Earth's axis by tiny but measurable degrees. Even a fraction of a second lost or gained compounds over centuries. Which raises the question, if ancient civilizations based their calendars on perfect alignments with the sun and stars, what happens when those alignments shift and no one tells the clock? And maybe, just maybe, that's why so many cultures began warning of a coming reset. Not just of power, not just of knowledge, but of time itself. For more hidden stories, subscribe to Reflections in Shadow, where forgotten truths find their voice again. For Prophecies Etched in Stone. Long before 536 AD, ancient civilizations carved warnings into stone, messages not meant for their own time, but for ours. In the highlands of Guatemala, the Mayans recorded long cycles of time they called bactons, vast epochs spanning thousands of years. One bacton, in particular, was believed to mark a great darkness when the sun would vanish, and time would collapse into chaos. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets speak of a day when the sky weeps ash and the gods turn their faces. A moment when even the moon is swallowed, and man forgets the order of days. And in Egypt, deep within the temple of Hathor at Dendera, a celestial diagram known as the Zodiac of Dendera contains a curious anomaly. A depiction of the sun, blackened, surrounded by grieving figures and a snake that winds backwards, symbolizing time unraveling. These weren't just myths. They were time capsules, and all seemed to converge around a singular theme. A future moment when the balance between light, time, and memory would falter. Some archaeologists have dismissed these inscriptions as symbolic, but others point to the precision with which these cultures track the heavens. The Babylonians could predict eclipses with eerie accuracy. The Mayan knew of planetary cycles still being studied today. And the Druids, though never leaving written records, aligned entire stone monuments like Stonehenge to celestial events. So when they all, from different corners of the ancient world, warned of a time when the sky would go dark and time would fracture, was it coincidence? Or were they pointing to 536 AD, or something yet to come? Perhaps the question isn't if they saw it coming, but how? Because if they could predict the first fracture in time, could they also be warning us about the next one? 5. The clues we're still ignoring. We often think of history as fixed, carved in stone, cataloged in books, explained by science. But scattered across ancient ruins, sacred texts, and even forgotten folk tales are warnings we've chosen not to see. In India, the Mahabharata describes a day when the sun turned blood red and time splintered into 1,000 slivers. In China, records from the Sui dynasty mention a sky so dark at midday that lamps were lit at noon, and crops withered as if cursed. And in Norse mythology, there's Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, beginning with a sun devoured by a wolf, and time itself unraveling. Are these just metaphors? Or encoded memories of something real, something the world lived through and then forgot? Modern science has explanations for many things: volcanic ash, solar minimums, atmospheric changes. But what science can't fully explain is how so many ancient civilizations describe the same kinds of disruptions across time, across oceans, with no contact between them. They didn't have satellites. They didn't have solar observatories. Yet they left behind symbols of eclipses, sun gods falling, and warnings of world resets. Today, we dismiss many of these as superstition. But what if we're the ones who are blind? Because the signs may not have stopped with ancient inscriptions. Satellite data has recorded magnetospheric anomalies near the poles. Auroras are showing up where they never used to. And global timekeeping, the atomic clock, has had to be corrected more frequently. Coincidence? Maybe. But maybe, just maybe, the ancients weren't telling stories. They were documenting patterns. Patterns we're only beginning to rediscover and still refuse to understand. And if we continue ignoring them, then next time, when the sky goes dark again, we won't just lose the sun. We might lose our place in time altogether. Final reflection. In the year 536, the sun vanished behind a veil of ash and silence. Time itself faltered, not just on sundials or ancient calendars, but in the memories of nations. And yet, most history books barely mention it. What if this wasn't just a forgotten event, but a reset? Ancient cultures tried to warn us through symbols, prophecies, and myths that mirror what modern science is only now beginning to understand. A solar anomaly, a time shift, a scar across the timeline of civilization. Maybe the real mystery isn't what happened, but why we stopped asking. Because the shadows of our past don't just linger. They reflect. And here, we read between the light and the dark. Welcome to Reflections in Shadow, where forgotten truths find their voice again. Smash that like button and subscribe for more hidden history stories.